Because as we look at Hebrews 11, near the middle or near the end, verses 32, it kind of lists a bunch of people that the author didn't get to expand upon. I mean, in the beginning, the author said, let me tell you about these characters, and he kind of would expand on what the characters did. Now at the end, he's just listing names, and he's blowing past them very quickly. So look at this, verse 32. And what more shall I say? I don't have time to tell you about Gideon. Remember we talked about him and the fleece and the doubt and the wanting to trust God. And Barak, remember that guy? He was the one who doubted that God had called him to go into battle. And so Deborah was the female judge over him, told him to go to war. But he said, I won't go if you don't go with me. And you remember how the opposing general died? A tent stake in the temple. Yeah, pretty awful. We talked about Samson a couple weeks ago and his use of his strength and God's power over him and how he defeated enemies. We talked about Jephthah last week. How many of you were here for last week's service about Jephthah? Don't make any deals with God and say, okay, God, whatever comes out of my door next, I'll sacrifice to you. You don't know who might be coming out that door. And then today about David and Samuel and the prophets. We're going to talk about King David today, actually Shepherd David. The idea is that David, there's so much to say about David that I should just do a whole sermon series on this person. He's one of the most well-known Old Testament characters that there is. In fact, I've read that David is quoted more times in the New Testament than any other Old Testament character. His name is used, his stories are told, his character is renowned. He's a superhero of the faith. In fact, he's the only one in Scripture in 1 Samuel 13 where God called him a man after God's own heart. Talk about Valentine's Day, huh? The person that God loved. This David, this character had the very heart of God that was exposed throughout his life. Now, was he perfect? No. Did he have failures? Of course. But as he walked through his life, we get to see how this person worked. One of my favorite pastors in college was Chuck Swindoll. He wrote this book. It's called David, a Man of Passion and Destiny. And in this book, he writes this simple quote in the beginning. He said, a poet, a musician, courageous warrior, national statesman, David distinguished himself as one of God's greatest men. In battle, he modeled invincible confidence. In decisions, he judged with wisdom and equity. In loneliness, he wrote with transparent vulnerability and quiet trust. In friendship, he was loyal to the end, whether a humble shepherd boy or an obscure musician before King Saul, he remained faithful and trustworthy. Even in his promotion to the highest position in the land, David modeled integrity and humility, a man after God's own heart. But it doesn't stop there. He says, but as we shall see, like any of us, he was anything but perfect. Having earned the public trust and respect, he forfeits all in a brief season of sensual pleasure. Then as the consequences kick in, he discovers another side of the man's makeup, lustful as a husband, weakness as a father, partiality as a leader. It's all there, written for us in black and white to learn, preserved for us to remember. A great man, though far from perfect, nevertheless lived a life with strength and emulating God's character. I love it. I love looking at how King David, or how David lived this life of character. And if you grew up in the church like me, you probably remember the children's Bible. Do you remember children's stories about David and Goliath? I looked up David and Goliath just on Google, and every single country in the world knows this story. Every single place in the world is familiar with the giant who came to try to defeat this little shepherd boy. You know, these pictures they're just so raw, so real of how David lived his life. So what I want to do is, without necessarily going over all of David's life, I just want to talk about this story of David and Goliath. But I don't want to do it in a way that's sort of familiar, like you learned in Sunday school with the flannel graphs, and he picked up 5 rocks and he slung the stone and he killed the giant. We're all familiar with that. I want to talk a little bit about how his character of faith is something we can emulate. If there's anybody in this list in Hebrews 11 of these characters that we could actually emulate, this would be one of them. David's character for God. So I'm going to go over a couple things as we talk about David and Goliath, and maybe ask the question, are you facing any giants in your life today? The metaphor is, are you facing something that seems insurmountable, something that's larger than you, something that looks defeating, and can you stand up with God's power to trust that he will defeat your giant? So let's look at number one. Number one is this: David spoke from experience. If we were to look at David's character and look at his faith as he walked with God, he spoke from experience. I think you can speak from experience. Some of the giants that you face in your life are very familiar giants. They're very familiar in your life. And so David spoke from this place of knowing how giants work, knowing how to defeat things that were a threat to him. Look at verse 32 of 1 Samuel 17. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Let me pause there for a minute. Here's the setting. Israel is facing the Philistine army, and in that day, instead of sending nuclear weapons across the airwaves or sending an electronic magnetic pulse defeater that would be something that would knock out everybody's cell phones or everybody's cars that would work, they would send one warrior out into this valley, and he would stand and bark orders at the other army and say, "Send out another one of your fighters." And the one who wins this little man-on-man battle, then the other army will be victim to us. The army will lose. And so they could attack them. And so this Goliath, he's 9 feet tall. They say in Scripture he was 3 meters tall. I don't know anybody that's 9 feet tall. In fact, I've looked up history, and they say the Guinness Book of World Records, one of the tallest men who ever lived was 8'11". So over 9 feet tall is this Goliath. 8'11", are you kidding me? You'd hit your head on every doorway that you ever walked through. Goliath comes out, and he's wearing 125 pounds of fish scale armor, of like scaled armor that's these metal scales that go over his body, 125 pounds. The very things that he's carrying, the weapons that he's holding are 25 to 50 pounds each. His javelin spear must have been over 10 feet long. And he would come out and he would bark orders at the Israelite people. He would yell at them and he would defy their God. He would say, "Your God is nothing. Your God is not the God of creation. You are going to lose this battle. I will send all of your bodies to be eaten by the vultures." And he would scream and defy God. And so David, he's the youngest of 7 brothers. How many of you are the younger sibling in your family? Right, and so you kind of grew up being teased and picked on and whatnot. Some of you older siblings, you don't even understand what it feels like to be the younger sibling picked on. So David comes and he brings this food to his 3 older brothers who are in the army. And the whole army is just standing there weak-kneed and defeated because this giant is barking at them for 40 days. The same defiant barking. So David comes up to the line, gives his food to his brothers, and starts listening in on what happens. And he says, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." So King Saul comes up and he hears about this and he replies, "Yeah, but you're not able to go against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a young man." Have you ever been told you're only something? You're not good enough? Have you ever been told you don't measure up? Have you ever been told that you're just not good enough at work? You're not good enough in this marriage. You're not good enough for your finances. You're just one of those, is what King Saul is saying. And this guy has been a warrior his whole life. Verse 34, "But David said to Saul," "Oh yeah? Your servant, this guy, has been keeping his father's sheep, and when a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from his flock, I went after it. I struck it, and I rescued the sheep from his mouth. Do you ever do that, King Saul? And when it turned on me, I seized it by the hair. Have you ever grabbed a lion by the hair? I haven't either. And I struck it and I killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of those, because why? He has defied the armies of the living God. That's the key. David knew that the giant had defied his God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. You know why I talk about experience with David the shepherd? Is because I think for you and I, we're familiar with our giants as well. And we have had experience with those addictions, or we've had experience with those feelings of rejection, or the feelings of denial, or the feelings of not being good enough. And we're very familiar with the voice of the giant. By now, I think we've lived our lives long enough to realize, oh yeah, that's what the voice sounds like. Oh yeah, when that voice says to me I'm not good enough, or I'm not capable, or I'm not something, that's just that familiar voice of the giant. And we've had experience overcoming difficulties in our past. Here's number 2. David empowered those in battle beside him. He cried out a rally cry to them, if you will. He said basically, hey guys, listen, you don't have to be afraid, because he has defied the living God. Remember why we're here. Remember what we're doing. Do you know in our lives we need accountability with each other? We need to hold hands with one another. We need each other to help us walk in our fights in the battle. Do you know one of the ways that Satan works is through isolation? Did you know that? And now with social media, people, ironically, are falsely feeling more connected when in reality they are becoming more lonely. Should I say that again? People are falsely using social media to become connected in a false cloud realm, if you will. Oh, how many likes do I have? How many people like what I'm doing? But in reality, people are feeling more and more isolated and lonely. So when David comes up to the battle, and he verse 26, he asks the men standing near him, hey, what's going to be done for this man who will kill this Philistine and remove this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the army of the living God? He knew his priorities, he knew where he was, and he was trying to encourage the other people in the army to say, hey, we need to remember that God is the one who we fight with, who we fight for. God is the one who wants to get the victory today. And so he's encouraging others to be accountable. Here's number 3. David told the enemy about God's victory. I don't have it on the screen, but Goliath would come down in the valley in verse 23 in 1 Samuel 17. Goliath would scream out the same defiant cry for 40 days in a row. Broken record. You're so bad. You people are going to die. You people don't worship God. You people. And David had enough. He's like, listen, you don't talk about my God like that anymore. He had courage enough to tell the enemy where he stood. So I love this in verse 45. David said to the Philistine, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin. I see your weapons. But I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. Do you know why he wanted to cut off his head? One, to show the Philistine army that he really did win the battle. I mean, when you pick up a head like a bowling ball, you're pretty much proving that guy's not standing anymore. But you know what the real truth is? The truth is he's tired of this guy defying the living God within him. And if he cuts off his head, the defiance stops, if you will. Have you heard the phrase, cut the head off the snake? So it's the same idea. Just get this guy to shut up about how bad he thinks my God is, about how little character I have, how I'm not trusting in this God. If I can silence that voice, then I can defeat my giant. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. The whole world will know this. David had a grander plan than just simply defeating this giant. Verse 47. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's. And he will give all of you into our hands. He had perspective. I don't know what kind of giants you're fighting, but if you are facing a giant that is too big for you, I encourage you to buy this book by Louis Giglio. It's called Goliath Must Fall. It's an incredible book. Louis Giglio is a preacher in Atlanta, Georgia. He's very well known for the Passion Conferences, and he's been preaching with college kids for, a dozen years or so. He's an incredible motivated speaker. If you have something in your life that you feel like is a Goliath for you, you need to buy this book. It's a simple read. It's a really good way to understand our perspective, the giant's perspective, and God's perspective. And here's just a couple things that he says. It's likely that you have a threatening giant in your life, an adversary or a stronghold that diminishes your ability to live a full and a free life. He says, frozen in the grip of rejection or fear or anger or comfort or addiction, we lose sight of the promises that God has for our life. Demoralized and defeated, we settle for far less than God's best. God has a better plan for you, a plan for you to live in victory. That's why he has silenced your giants once and for all. Some of you have overcome addiction. Some of you have overcome a very difficult thing in your life, and you see that God has defeated your giants, but some of us haven't. Some of us are facing this defeat every day, and we lose hope. We lose this idea that we have any sense to walk forward. The key to living free from our giants is not a better slingshot accuracy. I love that. It's not about you getting better at the fight, but keeping our eyes on the one and only giant slayer, Jesus. Put your hope in him and watch your Goliath fall. I love it because it teaches us, again, a little bit better perspective of how we walk by faith. Now, there are things that feel insurmountable. There are financial burdens on people. There are relational burdens on people. There are burdens on people that just feel way bigger than we could ever overcome. And God says, if you keep your eyes on me, if you keep your priorities straight, I will walk with you. Because here's the truth. We were not created to be defeated. We were not created to be defeated and to continue to fall to the giants in our lives, nor to live a life like people who have no victory. We were not created to be defeated or to fall or to live underneath something and feel like we have no power with God. God's Holy Spirit power has come that we might have life and have it to the full. So I don't know what giants you're facing, but I do want to remind you of 7 simple things that David had as his character of faith that we might learn from. 7 simple ways that we could learn how to grow in our faith. And these are just 7 things. I read this by John Maxwell, and this moved me this week. Maybe we could learn some of these ourselves. Number 1, David's perspective was grander than other people's. He had a perspective that was bigger than just those few warriors in the army who were afraid to die. He had a perspective that was larger. He didn't see Goliath the same way as everybody else saw him. He saw this as an opportunity for God to receive God's glory. So he said, all right, I'll go with this perspective. I'll see what God is doing. I know some of your stories. In fact, I wrote this week with some of your stories in mind. And I know some of you are blinded by the story that is in your life. You're blinded by the fact that you think your giant is greater than you, and you are defeated by this inability to step forward. And I think part of it is the perspective of God. God says, I have a greater purpose in your life than for you to be defeated by this one small thing. True story. Last night, I'm trying to go to sleep at 12:30, 1 o'clock. My daughter walks into my room. She's got tears. She says, Dad, I've been reading this guy's Snapchat all week, and he says he wants to die. He says he wants to pull the plug. He says he doesn't want to live anymore. And then I texted him, and I said, you can't do this. And he won't respond to me. Either his phone's dead, or I tried to call him, and he didn't call, and I don't know what to do. So at 12:45 last night, I said, well, let's call 911. She's like, I don't want to call the police. I don't want to get this guy in trouble. I said, well, do you know where he is on Snapchat? She says, yeah, I can see his location. I said, well, let's call 911. She goes, but I'm scared. I don't want the police to get involved and for him to, I don't know what. And I said, all we can do is take a step forward. Let's look at the bigger perspective. Do you want your friend to stay alive? She said, yes. So I called 911. Hello, what's the address of your emergency? I said, well, we don't have an address exactly, but this is the situation. And this person's going through this thing, and this is how he's been responding all week, and he wants to end his life, and we don't know how to help him. She said, I'll put an officer on it. He'll call you back. 10 minutes later, we got a phone call from an officer who said he was in Fort Collins, and he would go to these streets where she saw his address was where he was. And Briley felt this sense of release, this sense of, at least I did my part. At least I could see the bigger perspective of how this giant was trying to take over my life. Now, I don't know what you're facing. Like Tiana said, there have been deaths this week by a few people. I've heard of some suicides already this week. I continue to hear how hard life is. But we don't need to let our giants defeat us. We need to see God's bigger perspective. Here's number 2. David's methods were unique. David had more unique methods than this giant had. This giant came at him with infantry weapons, if you will. Goliath was a street fighter. He was on the ground, hand-to-hand combat fighter. David came in as an artillery person. Did you notice this? David didn't go down to fight him hand-to-hand combat. He had a sling and a rock. He knew what he was going to project. He wasn't going to come close to Goliath and let Goliath swing his 5-foot sword at him. David stood from a distance, and he had already defeated the giant in his mind because he was an artillery guy. Do you know that you can come at your giant from a different perspective than your giant actually thinks? Do you know that we win battles against our giants because we have God's perspective and we can use God's methods to defeat those things in our life that are trying to overcome us? God says, be anxious for nothing. Did you notice that? Don't just be anxious for a few things, like pick your top 3. He says, be anxious for nothing and trust me, and by prayer and supplication you can overcome. Did you know that? Number 3, his convictions were stronger than Goliath. His convictions in God were stronger. How are your convictions with God? Do you let people talk about your God and push your God around and tell you that your God isn't strong enough? Do you let people defeat you and tell you that your God can't do this, your God can't supply your needs, your God can't meet you where you're at? Or do you say, no, my God is sovereign. My God is holy. My God is gracious. My God is kind. I know people get hit by trains, but my God is actually more sovereign than this. I know people take their own lives, but my God is more sovereign than this. Do you have a conviction that says God is greater than other people who tell you your God is smaller? He knew Goliath had no covenant with God, and he called that out. He says, you don't even have a covenant with God, but I trust in my God to defeat you. Here's number 4. His motives were based on God's foundation. David's whole motives were based on God being more well-known in the world. He didn't take Goliath's threats personally. He didn't take the threats of the enemy personally. I don't know about you, but I don't like criticism. It's not on my top 10 list. Hey, I hope I go to church this week and I get criticized for something. I hope I get the phone call. I hope I get the email. I hope I get the person that says, I don't like the way you. And when you said, that really, I don't like that at all. Now, I'll take it and I'll work with it because I'm a manager of people, but it's not on my top 10 list. But listen, there's a key to handling criticism better. You know what it is? Don't take things personally. The person who wants to criticize me or say something, it's not about me. It's about how they wanted something to work a little bit better and I was in a hindrance, or I couldn't help them, or they didn't see it that way. And it's not personal. It's not I hate you. It's I want to move this ball forward, right? So I think in our life, we let a giant come at us. We take it personally. We get hurt and wounded, and I'm first in line, by the way. And I need to be remembered that God says, listen, my motive is to help grow your faith, to help you become a better person. Here's number 5. David's vision was greater than just material things. Do you ever let your giants just be material things? We got a big giant coming this summer. My daughter graduates from high school and she wants to go to a very expensive college on the West Coast. We're praying that she gets accepted and goes in, but $50,000 a year. It's a little bit bigger than my wife and I want to help pay for. And a $250,000 debt for 4 years of college is just the wrong thing to do. So we have this financial giant that's coming in our life, but we don't see that as a hindrance to God doing something great in my daughter's life. We don't see the dollar amount as something that's going to stop my daughter from going off to college somewhere, getting an education that's good for her, and God's going to use her in his life. So having the vision of God that's bigger than just a dollar amount, God says, I'm bigger than dollars. Here's number 6. David's experiences were stronger. He had experiences with the bear and the lion. He had experiences with defeating other sorts of giants in his life. Can I say something real? Satan is not creative. Did you know that God is creative and love is creative? God's love creates, and his creativity is endless, eternal. Do you know that Satan is stuck on a hamster wheel of repetitive harassing? Repetitive, nonstop, continual, day after day, same words, same attitudes, same sort of motives, and all he's trying to do is defeat you. But he's not creative at all. So if we can learn how Satan works and learn that his tricks aren't very good. Oh yeah, I've experienced this before. I've felt criticism before. I can get over this. I've felt how person's words can hurt me. I can get through this. I felt how debt is hard to get out from underneath. I can get through this. If we learn through experiences, we can defeat our giants. Here's number 7. David's attitude was positive. His attitude was, my Lord God is greater than you, the giant. God is going to help me get through this because God is greater than anything I can face. In fact, I read this. David saw Goliath not as a threat too big to hit, but as a target too big to miss. David slung a rock that's probably the size of a 5-ounce baseball at Goliath's forehead. Do you know if you stood in the MLB, if you stood at the pitcher's mound at a professional baseball game, some pitcher could bean a baseball at your forehead and possibly kill you? I would say the chances are very likely. That's what David did. He took these rocks and he had a sling. He slung it and he hit the guy in the forehead. He's done that before. He knows what he's doing. So his attitude was greater. He wasn't like chicken or afraid like all of his friends. He said, I'm going to go get this. Here's the key. Did you know Satan is after your soul? Do you know Satan wants to defeat you and wants to crush your spirit? Just like this Goliath wanted to defeat the Israelites. So here's a question. Here's a challenge for you this morning. Are you going to continue to live your life in fear? Or are you going to let the Lord have power over your giant? That's the challenge this week. That's the question. Are you going to let the stories of hurt and pain, let the people that continue to be a thorn in your side? Are you going to let the finances or the marriage difficulties or the addictions or the fear or the anxiety, are you going to let that continue to threaten you day after day after day? How many days are you going to let this giant just bark at you and tell you you're not worthy? Or are you going to be able to stand your ground and let the Lord win the battle? Can you let the Lord win the battle? Do you know where to look in Scripture to trust that God is greater than your giant? Scripture's all over the place. Look for the promises of God. I want to end this morning by talking about this book, David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell. This book is awesome. This guy, Malcolm Gladwell, he writes all these books about I don't know, they're called outliers, or they're like these people that are the Davids in life who overcome these Goliaths in real life. And this is a scientific approach to the David and Goliath story. This is the twist that I want to give you. I love in this book, he says that many of us just continue to tell the same story over and over again. He goes, what if the story was different than what you remember? He says, what many medical experts now believe, in fact, is that Goliath had a serious medical condition. He looks and sounds like someone suffering from what is called acromegaly. You know what that is? Giantism. That's called a human growth hormone that they think he had a benign pituitary tumor in his pituitary gland, and this human growth just continued to make him rise to be this giant. Do you know what that also implies? Scientifically, that means that it restricted his sight, and he had diplopia, or double vision. Did you know that Goliath maybe didn't see too clearly? And this person is saying that when Goliath sent the shieldsmen down in front of him, there was a person that was the shield bearer. He would walk down. Now, a shield bearer was really only reserved for the artillery to catch arrows, right? To protect yourself from an arrow. But he was an infantryman walking down with a artillery sword's shield in front of him. Possibly, this guy says, so that Goliath could see where he was going, because he might have had double vision. One of the ways we know this is the very scripture that he barks out at David. He says, you come at me like a dog with sticks. Do you know David only had one staff? He didn't have two sticks. So Goliath possibly had double vision. Do you know what the implication is? Our giants have deficits. Our giants have faults that they don't even know they have. The things in your life that are trying to defeat you have a weakness that you could say, listen, I trust in God to be greater than you. You have a weakness that you possibly can't even see straight. And here you are trying to defeat my soul. Well, Satan, get out of my life. Giant, go away. You are not to be victorious in my life. They can't see straight. Here's where I want to close this morning. Do you know Jesus defeated the giants in his life through the use of Scripture? When he faced Satan, he said, it says here, and it says here, and it says here. Do you remember that? Do you know that Peter and Paul faced the defeat of their giant in their life through suffering? They suffered, and they walked in hardship, and they trusted that God was greater than their pain. And do you know that the church is known to defeat our giants through unity and love? We are known as people who love each other and are accountable to each other and help each other defeat our giants. It's harder to defeat your giant in isolation. But if we walk in accountability with each other, in fact, this scripture is one of my favorites, John 13:34. Jesus said, a new commandment I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you're my disciples if you love one another. Did you notice the little as I have loved you? How did Jesus love us? Unconditionally. He gave up his life. He was willing to go farther in a relationship than sometimes we go. Sometimes I'm like, well, I'll love you in that box. I'll love you over there. I'll love you for a minute. I'll love you with $5. I'll love you. I'll help you. Jesus said, if you love them like I've loved you, then the world will know that you're my disciples. So the key to defeating our giants is accountability too. Challenging. But don't sit there alone. Don't isolate yourself and wait to just go to battle with your giant. Trust, be prepared. Ask people to love with you and to walk against your giant. God's given us promises that are eternal, right? You know, something I forgot to tell you was that your giants are just temporary. I forgot to tell you that your giants they mock and they mimic this eternal pressure that will sound and feel defeating forever. But the truth is, they're just temporary. You know the reason why this guy wanted to kill himself last night on the phone with my daughter? Because his girlfriend broke up with him. Now, we can kind of laugh at that or go, oh my gosh, it's just a girlfriend, or oh my goodness, it's just a relationship, but it's real for that person, right? They think it's real, but if you back up a little, you say, well, it's just a temporary situation. It's not eternal, right? You know why we get defeated by our giants? We misunderstand that we think they're eternal giant. They're just temporary things. So, ask the Lord to defeat your giants this week. Ask the Lord to be proven good and to receive His glory that is due Him. And God will walk with you through your giants. Amen? Will you receive the blessing this week? May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make His face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace, both now and forevermore. Amen? Amen.